And actually, welcome to Spiritual Life Coaching Sermon Sunday 101. And I'm going to start with a quote, a vocation and call kind of quote. The place where you are called to be is the place where your deep gladness and the world's deep need meet, where both happen. Frederick Buechner. I love that definition and that idea of call, where it's your deep gladness and the world's deep need meet together. It's not just you struggling through and painfully trying to do something good and just trying to make it happen, but it's also not you just going and eating the milkshake every day and just hanging out and doing whatever that has nothing to do with anyone else. It's that much deeper down than that deep gladness and letting that out, and in a way that does come and intersect with the world and help make the world a better place. That is call. That is vocation. And I think that's a little of what Jesus is talking about here. And if we get beyond the first part, but the first part of that, which gets pretty tough too, you get millstones around necks. We're talking about taking out hands and feet and eyes too, if they cause others to stumble. We could preach about that too, and maybe another time. But what I want to focus on today is the end part of this, the salt. Because it all leads up at the end to the salt. And the salt is a part at the end that we might just otherwise ignore and think, oh, okay, that's just something, but then we'll go on to the next thing. And it just says salt is good. That doesn't seem like a big deal. It's not bad, but it's not great, like God is great. So why would we focus on the salt? But a lot of times when you have tough texts like that, and then you have a culmination, it's that last part, it's very meaningful. So let's not miss that. Let's look and explore a little bit about what perhaps this salt is about. What does it mean that salt is good and that we should perhaps have this salt in us? What's it like to be a salty person? You might think that having salt might mean being really out there, being brash, and being willing just to say it like it is and tell others what they should be doing too and how it is for them and everything else. But the way that Jesus is talking about having salt, it's actually probably almost the opposite of that. And it's because of one word. And it's not that salt doesn't have flavor and oomph and passion. Those things are all true. But Jesus says, have salt in yourselves. Yes, so it's about an inner bringing out, not trying to control others and what they're doing in the outside world, but bringing out from what's within you. And isn't that part of a true sense of call? So let's look a little bit deeper in that too. What does this bringing out mean? Salt is good. Good is the word in English that translators were able to use. And of course, anytime we translate, in this case for the New Testament, it's Greek going into the English, the translators have to pick a word. But the word they're going with is kalon. And for kalon, there are a lot of different things it can mean. Good is a broad, good definition, but it only speaks a little bit to what we're talking about. The translators could have just as easily said, salt is ideal. That's another definition of this Greek word, as is the word right. Salt is right, as is a number of other words too. Salt is fitting. Salt is honorable. These are all definitions of kalon, which we hear translated as good. Now, if we think of it as being right and fitting and honorable, a little more call possibilities now, right? A little more vocation possibilities, because that's what we hope for a call in life for us. Something that fits, something that's right, and something that's honorable for us to be able to do and in how we meet the world. That's this word. So suddenly we realize that salt is a little bit bigger meaning here of what Jesus is talking about. And there are two more words with it too that kalon can be translated as, and those words are beautiful and precious. Now you may be thinking, Pastor Mark, you're going a little far here though. Salt is precious. Salt is it's a common earthly element. What's the big deal with salt? And I could agree too. It seems that way at first glance until we look a little bit deeper again. One thing it reminds me of is a Star Trek episode. I had to look it up. And you'll have to figure out over time if I'm more of a Star Wars or Star Trek fan, because you're getting a combination of both now and then in sermons. So there was an episode of Star Trek back in 1966 called The Man Trap. And in it, Dr. McCoy's old girlfriend is there on a planet, or it's a semblance of his old girlfriend. It's really a creature that has some kind of mind control or something else to be able to make themselves appear to be something other than they are. So you think it's his old girlfriend, but it turns out in reality to be, as we find later in the show, a salt-sucking monster that brings all the salt out of everyone. I'm thinking, really? That's the scary monster? It takes our salt. Oh, it takes our high blood pressure causing sodium. Not very scary, right? But if you actually look at what Harvard Medical School says, salt actually is essential to life. It's just that we Americans tend to usually have a lot too much of it. So don't say, Pastor Mark said in the sermon, we need salt, we need more salt. That's not what I'm saying. We have plenty, but we do need some. Harvard says that without any sodium, we wouldn't even be able to transmit nerve impulses. Without some sodium, we couldn't contract and relax muscle tissue, including the heart muscle and including the blood vessels. Without some salt, we couldn't live. So the dialogue in the Star Trek episode was actually based on a truth. So now, we realize actually symbolically and literally, salt is precious. So what is this salt we're talking about? It's the same I began to mention in the children's message. If we've lost our saltiness, how do we have any seasoning in life? And I don't think we ever really truly lose our salt. I think it's all within us. But sometimes, and when I'm speaking of salt, I am speaking symbolically too. I'm speaking to that flavor that is uniquely you, to your passion, to your gifts, to your spirit, to the way that the potter has made and molded the clay, which is you, that's unique to you. And sometimes when we go through life, we pull out those deepest things, and then we are hurt when they don't happen the way we might hope they would, and we try to stuff those dreams, to stuff that salt and flavor away because we don't want to be hurt more. And we get bitter or angry or depressed or just kind of bland. We just kind of let it go and muddle our way through life. Jesus, our great Savior, and in today's gospel, also our great spiritual life coach, is offering us a whole different invitation. Have salt in yourselves. Don't have that salt lose its saltiness. Bring that out. And when I'm talking about the salt too, I'm not talking about the most immediate desire you might have, like, man, I really want a hot fudge sundae right now. That's not exactly what I'm talking about. It's about going so much deeper. It's about that deep stuff that perhaps maybe even has been with you since you were a young child. Those deep desires, those deep longings that just seem to fit who you are or who you would want to be, and the ones that are so much a core part of you that it might feel scary to even whisper them to someone else, worrying if they might laugh or if they might say that I don't see that in you. And because it's such a deep thing, it would be such a big thing if someone weren't affirming of us. Those are the kinds of things I'm talking about, that deep down flavor, passion, unique authenticity of who you are. Jesus, the Christ, is saying, let that out. And the great thing for us, too, is we don't have to figure out how our salt, how our passion and flavor of seasoning that makes us uniquely us, we don't have to figure out exactly how that fits into the path of how it's called for the world and getting the world's greatest need. Sometimes we don't have a sense of that at all. But the wonderful thing is, and I've experienced this in my life and others in their lives, I've seen this as a witness so many times, when we live as our true deep selves and bring out those unique parts of us that were made and created, by the way, that way by God, when we do that, God opens doors and windows in ways often totally unexpected or seen coming. and we connect together our sense of our authentic selves and an opportunity for call out in the world. And there is resonance. And the great thing with this, and all this is gift from Christ. We're so used to hearing, I'll point to the cross so many times. I'll point to how Christ suffered and died and for our salvation. But this also is gospel gift for us today too. Even though it seems invitation or instruction or direction, all of it is gift for us, for life. It is all life-giving. Because when we let out that salt, when we let ourselves have some of that vulnerability to be who we are, another wonderful, great byproduct of that is we tend to be at peace. It's salt and peace together. Because if we're being who we are and whose we are as a child of God, then whatever we might have held on to or tried to let go and blanded our way through life and lost our saltiness and tried to dig down, and whatever the animosity we would have carried, a resentment or depression from not really truly being who we are, it's released. And it's released not just if we got our ultimate dream with that salt. It's released from the very first step of just being ourselves. Not just because of what happens out in the world, but regardless. We've already won. It's already life. It's already flavor and seasoning and beauty and preciousness from just being the child of God that we have been created to be. And then the last gift with this too, and another beautiful, precious gift, is when we are doing this, we don't have to worry about trying to be salty with everyone else and figure out what's going on with them and try to make them salty too. Remember, Jesus says, have salt in yourselves. Yes. And when we live as our true, authentic selves, just naturally, without us even trying, when others are around who haven't fully let out that salt in themselves, when they see us that way, it is inspiring and permission-giving for them not to be like us, but to let their salt come forward too, and to be more salty again with how and who they have been called to be. And it also then brings them peace. And when we are at peace and they are at peace, then the we and the they are all together in peace. And that is a big, huge message not to be overlooked in what seems to be a little short text about salt. So may we hear and receive and live the words of our Savior and spiritual life coach today, Jesus the Christ, in this simple invitation. Have salt in yourselves and be at peace with one another. Amen.